Hello, welcome to the No Rest for the Vivid podcast. My name is Claire Hill, self-belief coach and founder of the Vivid Business Club. I was also going to say the founder of the podcast. I am obviously the founder of the podcast. I don't know where my plans have gone. They've just completely gone. Before I introduce my guest today, please subscribe and follow the podcast. I'm like beggar friend with this. Every single episode I'm saying it, but it's making a difference because I can see those followers and those subscribers go up. The more subscribers and followers I have, it means the better the guests that come on to give you free value. By the way, you could run your business and grow it massively just by listening to this podcast. So if you're feeling generous and you think, do you know what? I've got a lot out of all of the episodes that Claire's done. I think this is episode 212 today. So go on, give us a little like and a follow, and even better if you feel generous to leave a review. The end. I have to do that first, Ailish. I'm sorry. I have to do that. I welcome you in. So it's done. And I've said my bit and I've asked. Thank you so much, Ailish, for being here. Do you want to introduce yourself? What's your name? Where do you come from? What do you do?
I feel like I'm on what was Cilla Black's
Blind date.
blind date. That was it. What's your
Yeah.
name? Where'd you come from? So hello, I'm Ailish, and I am a lifestyle business coach. So what that means is I help entrepreneurs, essentially female entrepreneurs and online business owners, to create a life, not just a living, for sustainable success without the burnout. So I tend to focus on three core areas, which is mindset, strategy, and energy, because over the past 9 years of being in the online space, I've seen lots of iterations of businesses. I've seen lots of different iterations of being an online entrepreneur. And what I found was the people who not only created the success that they wanted, but also the life that they wanted and the fulfillment that they wanted, made sure that those three areas were fundamental to what they did every single day and how they showed up. So this is what I help other entrepreneurs with. And I feel like it's part of my life calling. So I'm really, really I just love doing it so much.
It's lush. Tell me, where did it all begin? What's the business love story?
Yeah. So it started about just over 9 years ago, when I kicked everything off with a multi-award winning online blog. And that was focusing around natural and organic beauty, because I had a bit of a love for beauty, still do, always will. And that then evolved into running online events before every woman and her dog decided to start running summits when COVID hit. So I've been running them for quite a few years, and they were focused around wellness and getting the glow from the inside out. So that was around what you eat, what you think, how you move, what you use, and what you do, so that you could become this glow getter. And my previous business was called the Glow Getter. So that then naturally evolved into starting to work with brands online, because they were coming and sponsoring the event and then seeing what I was doing, and they're like, hey, I just need some help to be able to grow online. And I was like, well, I can help you with that, which then evolved into an award-winning membership. And I launched a few courses in between then as well. So I ran the membership and started to do strategy work and coaching with these brand founders so that they could then grow online. And then that naturally evolved into what I do now, which is full-time coaching and strategy as well. So that's part of a group coaching program, which is called Thrive Mastery. And that's where I focus on those three core areas of mindset, strategy, and energy mastery. So yeah, that's kind of like the 9 years just all condensed into a minute or so.
Where did you come up with your, did you find that the common pathway and the common, obviously me being an online business owner, female entrepreneur, what you're saying about, growing sustainably without burnout, it's music to all of our ears, that we can have that success that we dream of without sacrificing ourselves, basically, isn't it? where did you sort of find the root cause, and what do you see people making? No, hold on, let me rephrase this. I don't know where. I'm so sorry when my words have gone out of the window. I'm just gonna lean back. Right, let's reverse. When where did you find, when you're meeting these women, that those pivotal parts of their life that needed to be looked at, energy, strategy, and mindset? Could you, if you had to, would you prioritize any of those, or what do you feel like people need to concentrate on first?
Yeah, I always say, yeah, well done. I always say that we have to start with mindset, because success is 80% mindset and 20% strategy. Because I can give you all the strategies in the world, I can give you all the marketing tools in the world. Like I've got a background in a previous life in marketing strategy, but I can give you all of those. That's not a problem. But if you haven't got your mindset right, and you don't fully believe that you're going to, whether you're worthy enough, going on in your head, whether there's any mindset, money mindset beliefs that you've got there, if you haven't addressed those, then the strategies will never work, because you just won't end up doing it. So I always recommend starting out with the mindset piece first. And the reason well, it's not necessarily the reason, but I decided to train in something called positive intelligence when I was looking at mindset work, because I personally have been on a very long journey as well. And I found that I've done the Tony Robbins events. I've walked across the hot coals to like signify a new life. I've done the therapy where I did therapy every week for 2 years. I had coaches. I had done the visualizations. I'd done the affirmations. I had tried everything.
Yeah.
And then I came across something called positive intelligence, and I was so blown away by it that I ended up training in it myself, because it was the number one thing that I could see that made a difference. And the science behind it was the guy who created it is a gent called Shazad Shamin over in the US, and he's a Stanford lecturer. And he applied factor analysis to all of the different mindset trainings out there. Now, what factor analysis is it's where you look at the whole entire subject of something, and then you can find the root cause of it. So factor analysis then brings it down to the root cause. And what that looks like is that we all have 10 different saboteurs in our heads. So we have a master saboteur, which is the judge, and that judges ourselves, others, and circumstances. And then that can activate these other accomplice saboteurs. So they can be like hyperachieving, people pleasing, being a victim, being hyper rational, being controlling. And there's more that you can go into there. And what it then did was then through an app help to retrain your brain through neuroscience, because what we tend to find is, and you'll probably resonate with this quite a lot, is that a lot of people stop at insight, and they don't build the new mental muscles required to be able to actually change their brain. So it's like, we'll sign up to a free workshop, or we'll listen to a podcast, or we'll watch a YouTube video, or we'll see a quote on Instagram, and we're like, oh yeah, it's really inspiring. And I'm like inspired to like motivate myself for that next hour. And then those thoughts start to come in, and those limiting beliefs potentially start to come in, and then we start to sabotage ourselves. So what positive intelligence does is then through an app, it helps you to literally rewire your brain to create new neurons, so that you can, instead of everything being bad and perceived as really tricky and horrible, and when us listening to that preconceived and those made up thoughts in our head, we can start to choose a new way. So this is why I get people to go through the mindset training first, and I take people through mindset training first and foremost, because when we can look at all of that, then we can go, okay, now you've done all of those things. Let's look at your identity. Let's look at the elevated identity that you want to be able to have whilst you're then growing your business, but also living your life. You can dream so much more, because you've tackled those demons in your head, and you know a methodology to then be able to deal with them when they keep coming up, because they'll never go away.
No.
But it's a case of having the tools and having a system that you can use, which really genuinely works, to be able to go, okay, you're not going to be in the driving seat. You can sit in the boot, but I'm in charge here. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question of what comes first.
Yeah, I
But
freaking loved
mindset.
it though. It was brilliant. What can you remember the biggest shift for you when you found positive intelligence?
Yeah. I felt seen with it, and I felt like there was a real shift from those thoughts in my head always being there and telling me I'm not good enough, I can't do it, I'm not worthy, all of those things, to thank you for keeping me safe, but I'm here to lead now. And if you've ever heard of internal family systems, it is kind of a little bit similar in the sense of we have all of these different parts of ourselves, and they are all valid and they are all there to keep us safe. But what we tend to do is let some of those parts of ourselves rule, and almost like the inner guidance system, or those quiet whispers of the soul that we tend to hear that are our real true guidance, are so quiet because the other ones are ruling, and we need to just turn the volume down on those ones that are ruling, that don't really help serve us, and bring the volume back up for that real true essence of you. So for me, the real shift was when I started to learn about the sage mindset. So when we talk about saboteurs, they tend to be in the left-hand side of your brain. And when we talk about the sage mindset, which is the wisest part of you, where you've got that laser-focused, action-taking side, that creativity, the kind side of you, the empathetic side of you, that's all on the right-hand side of your brain. And when I started to learn how to be able to nurture that right-hand side of my brain a lot more and be kinder to myself, but also stop fighting myself so much, that's when things just started to get so much better for me. And to be able to live just a happier life and a more fulfilled life, regardless of what the outcome of what I was trying to achieve was going to be. Because previously, one of my saboteurs is hyperachiever. So hyperachiever is very much about, I'll be happy when, let me get to that next level, let me hit that next revenue goal, let me get that next award. And I was very, very good at doing all of those. But what tended to happen was I was being pushed by this fear rather than being pulled by this greater vision for myself and this fun and this love and this creativity. And that was one of the key shifts that I started to see, which was, oh, I'm curious, let me see what I can make happen here, rather than, if you don't get these next 3 sales, then you're a failure. If you don't hit this, then you're a failure. And they can be so subtle that sometimes it's just this really small acknowledgement inside yourself where you're like, oh, that's different. And oh, that feels good. Or it can be as extreme as you look completely different, because I've had quite a few of my clients who've come to me, done the work, and I've taken them through part of the initial mindset work. And they've had so many people say to them, and even I've noticed it on the call, where they look physically different and you just can't explain it, but you're like, whoa, you look amazing. And they're like, yeah, somebody said that to me the other day. So
Wow.
for me, yeah, honestly, it's nuts. I love it. I love it so much. But for me, it was definitely that internal shift of, that could be cool, rather than that you're a failure. So I think I wouldn't be able to give you the day, but that was definitely, I noticed like the shift there, with using that system, that just really, really helped me.
Wow. I love this. I love it so much. I know, being a self-belief coach, this is all I talk about, and like how to 10x self-belief. And I've got my 7 steps. And part of that is looking at where your doubt is rooted: imposter syndrome, fear, worthiness. Sounds like that's a saboteur, but I just gathered that up from my experience. I love this. And do you know, I feel like I've come across it, but you know, sometimes you just learn about something but don't really pay attention to it and you sort of glide past it. I
Mm.
feel like now is the time I need to know about these 10 saboteurs. What is the most common one, do you think, that people face?
So with female entrepreneurs, it's definitely the hyperachiever and people pleaser.
Mm,
So I mentioned the hyperachiever just before, but the people pleaser kind of does what it says on the tin. It's very much about externally making sure that everybody else is okay, going above and beyond to make sure that everybody's happy. If you're then an empath, there's a next level version of that. So I'm definitely an empath. So it's
mm,
like reading the room and trying to be able to change the energy in the room so that everybody else is all right, and then you leave exhausted. So those are kind of the two key ones that I have seen time and time again. Now, there are 10 of them altogether, so there are varying degrees, but I do find that with female entrepreneurs, like the hyperachievers there and the people pleaser, but you like it's standard that that would show up anyway because of the way society
mm,
portrays a message about women we should be human doings, not human beings.
mm.
And we are there to help everybody else, and we are there to give and be givers and not look after ourselves because that's selfish. So this is
Yeah.
where these narratives come in, and it's so messed up that we have that. But that's where the narrative comes in for women. And then with the hyperachiever side, again, you look in that online space and it's like, oh, I get the 10K, 20K, 100K, like 8-figure, like years, months, whatever it is. And then when people are talking about money, they're like flashing the cash and being like, this is this is what success should be. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, let's just stop with that. The version of success that you want, well, what is it? Because it's individual for everybody. And yet there's only one narrative. It's very, very masculine. It's very linear. It's like success at all costs. Otherwise, you're a failure. There's no narrative around, well, what happens when shit hits the fan? What
Mm,
happens when there's loss and there's grief? What happens when you have a baby? What happens when you're going through the menopause? What happens when you've got elderly parents who you're trying to look after and you're trying to care for them and your children? There's none of this life stuff that's in there, which is inherently placed upon women to do that
yeah.
work, which is unpaid. And yet we all still buy into the online version of success, which is like hit those money months and then you'll have everything that you want. But it's like, I can speak from experience. I've hit those money months and I've been bloody burned out.
Yeah.
And then it's taken me a good chunk of time. I got really badly burnt out a few years ago, and it took me 18 months until I felt like myself again.
Wow.
And there was nobody there to give me advice on, well, what happens if you burn out and you have a business? What happens when you're having to support your partner with grief and you have a business? What happens when you become a full-time stepmom and you're supporting your new child, your new bonus child with their grief, and you're running a business? Like, there's none of these nuances that are in any of it. So going back to your question, like, it's normal that those two saboteurs would come up quite a lot. But for anybody who's listening that doesn't necessarily resonate with those saboteurs, there are other ones which I'm sure you'll come into. Like, I've got quite a few clients who are controllers.
Mm,
So, and this again comes as being part of a mum, I think, where you feel like it's an anxiety-based need to be able to control everything, to make sure everything's okay, that you don't trust anybody else to do the job as good as you.
yeah.
And you just keep working and working and working, and then eventually you'll start to get a little bit resentful because you're doing all the work and you're not kind of just letting life happen a bit more. So yeah, there's loads of them and they're fascinating. And it's so funny because when I do the descriptions of when I'm in a talk, or I do the descriptions of the judge and then the 9 accomplice saboteurs, everyone's like, yes, I can see myself. I feel a little bit called out.
Yeah.
And then, but that self-awareness is a great place to start. So then you
Yeah.
can build on it.
I love it. A couple of things. One, I 100% agree with you with this money thing. I am so, again, I did a piece of content the other day just saying, I'm never going to tell you like how much my business is worth or what I'm turning over, because I don't want you to choose me because of the money that I make. I want you to choose me because you believe in what I teach, my core values, that you like and trust what I've done, my experience in life, that I'm a normal person, not because, you know, I see it so much and it really is starting to really wind me up. So I totally 100% agree with you. And thank you for saying that too. I agree. I'm really like refreshed by it. And the second is I did another piece of content the other day because I realized that I was shrinking away from the fact that I've got my shit together. And the reason I've got my shit together is for two reasons. One, because I make sure I book my time off and I don't get burnt out and I do stuff for me and I prioritize my own energy, which I want to talk about in a minute. But, and also because I define what having my shit together means. I don't let anybody else make that definition for me. I decide what having my shit together looks like. And I've got my shit together. And I don't like when there is content out there that says, and again, we're leaning into that definition of success. When people say, oh no, not everybody's got their shit together. Not everyone, you know, everybody's sort of missing something. You don't have to settle for that. You can just rest and just redefine it to your standards and what suits you and your family and what you want out of life. And then define, have you got your shit together? Well, yeah, I have. And also that period, that life thing, there's something going on for me that it's still a scab. You know, they say don't share scabs, share scars. It's still a scab. So when it's a scar, we'll share it. But I'm navigating that. And I'm really grateful that I'm like, okay, this is really good for my clients because I'm learning how do you deal with life and what's going on in you, in your heart, and what's going on around you while running a business. And I'm great. I wish it wasn't going on, but I'm grateful for it in that other sense. So thanks. Are we twins or something? Because it's like we're on the same wavelength. I noticed as well, you've got brown hair and blue eyes. I never meet anybody with brown hair and blue eyes. This is on everything. I was like, oh my God, it's really rare. Did you know? There you go. Anyway, going back to you, when you're talking about energy management and like energy, you've said about focusing on energy management rather than time management. Have you, before you talk about that, have you read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. He's coming on the podcast in a couple of weeks. I'm so excited. I know. So I'm just like, I'm going to massively fangirl because I've literally read it about 7 times. But you know about the Newton's law of time or whatever it is, one of them, and then Einstein's. Is this where this stems from, that idea of you can sort of flex with time, but really you need to focus on your energy? Where does the sort of the principle stem from?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I personally redefined it because I was so sick of the male pale stale version of time management techniques that lent into they could go to work their 9 to 6 job, but then come home and be able to relax because there was a woman at home being able to support them. And I just found that there was no conversations around women's hormones, around our cycles, around our energy levels. And it was very much about men's hormone cycles being like 24 hours, therefore you can do everything that you need to do. And it was very, very linear. Whereas women were cyclical. Like if you put us out in the wild, we would then start to sync up with the moon. And it was like, I really wanted to start to bring in something that was a little bit different in terms of looking towards cyclical living, because nature has a lot of answers for us, looking towards harnessing as well technology so that then we could stop being on this hamster wheel all the time or in our online businesses, and start to use that not only to save time in the like chronological sense, but also to give us space to be able to breathe. So there's kind of 2 different schools of thought there. There's nature with the cyclical side of living and being able to then harness our energy, because also if we look at the way the 9 to 5, 9 to 6 is set up, that was created in the Industrial Revolution to be able to like help track workers coming in and out of the mills so that they could then maximize profitability. Whereas in actual fact, if we look at it, like if we start to work with our energy a lot more, then we can be so much more potent, we can be so much more aligned with how we create. Because I'll just give you a really simple example, which I know lots of people will resonate with. If you're really tired and you sit down at your desk and you're like, right, okay, I need to do this email, for example, or I need to write something for a course, or I need to write some notes up for a coach, like one of my coachees. And I am absolutely knackered because I've had a shit night's sleep from being pregnant, or the kids have been up, or whatever it is. You can just be anything. If I sit down there and then I stare at my screen and I try and do the work, is it going to be my best work? Probably not. Whereas if I then say to myself or ask myself, what do I need right now? What does my body need right now? Because I really fundamentally believe body comes first, then business is second. If we can ask ourselves what our body needs, and it says, actually, I need a cup of tea and I need like half an hour rest, we allow ourselves to go and do that, then we can come back, and those notes and that course that you're creating, or that piece of content that you're creating, is going to be so much more potent because you've allowed yourself to relax. Now, this does require a level of trust that, again, we're not taught in society. We're not brought up as women to trust ourselves. We all have that inner knowing, which is very much there. Like, we know when we feel in danger. Like, that inner knowing is there. We know when something doesn't feel right. We know when something does feel right. But yet, even though it's in a work situation, we don't trust it sometimes. So we need to sit there and kind of listen to our bodies and just drop into them a little bit more, so that then we can really start to harness that energy management rather than the time management, and go, actually, I need to just rest for a bit, or I need to sit on the TV. I need to sit on the sofa and watch the TV for a bit and just watch some Netflix, and then I'll come back to it. Because if we can allow ourselves and trust ourselves with what our body is telling us, then we can create from a place that is just so much more inspired and energetic than if we'd have just sat there and made ourselves do the work, even though we were really tired. Now, I will say, I am not perfect at this. Like, the hyperachiever comes out and she's like, sit your ass down and do the work.
Yeah.
And then I do have to check in with myself quite a lot and be like, no, Ailish, just calm down a little bit. Like, nobody's going to die. You're not a brain surgeon if you don't do this piece of content or you don't do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But so it is an ongoing process, and you do have to constantly manage it, but you do start to then get to a level of trust and self-awareness that it almost becomes intuitive after a little while as well.
This is, again, I love this. I've learned, I lean into my cycle, and I don't book anything when, I'm due on or anything like that. And I book in things, so podcast interviews, when I'm like in that ovulation type of my cycle. And I do any, if I'm doing a launch for anything, it's all based around that. But I also learn about, I don't know if you're familiar with human design, but I'm a projector in human design, which means that I also need to rest and listen to my energy levels. And for years, I thought I was just inadequate and I would push myself through. And now I realize it's just who I am. And when I feel like that, I go, okay, it's time to just gonna have a little rest, have a nap, read my book. But it means that my energy levels are much more consistent than they used to be because I listen to it more. So again, like you said about trusting and trusting the fact that I will perform better and have a better quality. And also this idea that especially first thing in the morning, I'm really good first thing in the morning, especially if I get up before my family and everything. And I can do the same amount of work 3 times as fast first thing in the morning than I can later in the day. So I sort of carved out when my son goes to school. So like tomorrow's an early day. I know that from like 7 till 10 o'clock, I'm going to basically get a whole day's work done in that minimal time, because that's when I've got so much energy and it's just wonderful. But it's about being aware of those energy levels and just going, oh, and seeing a pattern as well. It's identifying the pattern, isn't it?
Yeah, massively. And also, if at the end of that those 3 hours of work, you want to stop, it's also about trusting yourself that you can stop and enjoy the rest of the
Yeah.
day, because you
Yeah.
don't need to keep working. Now, I'm not saying as well, like I sometimes feel when I talk about this, that some people might be thinking, oh, well, you're just going to slack for the rest of the day or you won't get the same results because you're not necessarily doing the same amount of work. Well, that's not entirely true, because those 8 hours that you might have taken to do that work, you've then got done in 3 hours. And then then the rest of that time is for you to recharge your batteries, go and enjoy life, go and do something that doesn't involve being sat at your desk. But people then think, oh, well, if you're away from your desk, then you're going to fail or you're not going to achieve those goals. And it's like, no, let's just try a different way and play with it and be curious.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Anyone's not come across any of this before, this podcast might change their life. Like literally. I set up this podcast to share stories about being in the messy middle when we've really faced doubt and fear, and we've thought, what's the point? But we got through to the other side. And I'm guessing you've been there. Have you got anything to share? Because I don't know about you, but when I've been in these moments, I can't find enough content to comfort me in those moments. So I've decided I'm going to create it.
Yeah, it's a great question. And thank you for talking about it, because I really believe that it needs to be talked about more. So yeah, so my partner, just a bit of context, my partner, my fiance, he is a widower. He lost his wife during childbirth and of their second child. And then the second child that was born, called Isabel, then passed away a few years ago. And I met him probably 2 years into that journey when his daughter, his second child, when we were together, just passed away. And so what then happened was I was there to support him, but also navigating, how do I show up? How do I support somebody who is a widower? How do I support somebody who's just lost their child? How do I support somebody who has a son who at the time was 5? And how do I become a full-time stepmom? And all of those things that came with it, and run an online business and show up and look after my clients. And what happened was I got burnt out quite massively. And with burnout, it wasn't just a case of I just need to go and have a nap or I need to have a holiday. This was burnout on a physical level, a mental level, an emotional level, a spiritual level, or like I think there's 7 different types of burnout that you can experience, and I was pretty much ticking all of them. And so what that meant was I then had to look at everything in my business. I had to look at everything in my life and go, right, where am I? What do I actually want to make happen here? I need to have some proper conversations with myself and be truly radically honest with myself, because there was a lot of, oh, what's this person doing that maybe I should employ that strategy? Oh, no, what about this? And that looks like a nice definition of success for that person. Maybe I can have some of that. And never truly trusting myself enough to sit with myself and go, well, what does that success look like for you? And how do you want to show up? How do you want to live your life? And how can you be the best version of yourself whilst also being able to support these people in your life who you really love and you want to help through this really tricky time? So what that meant was there was a lot of honest conversations with me, also with my partner, also just trying to navigate everything. And there was a real messy middle, as you call it, the real messy middle part for quite a while. And like I sought support to be able to like figure all of these things out, because there was, again, like going back to what I'd mentioned before, there's no narrative and there's no conversations about what happens when shit hits the fan and what happens when you're having to deal with all of these really, really heavy things. And you kind of want to talk about them online, but you also don't want to, because you don't want it to be too heavy, because people just want light. And so it took me a while to kind of just step away. There was, I think, a year where I just didn't really post anything on Instagram. I just wasn't really kind of doing anything, and I was letting my business tick along. and I wasn't really doing very much with it. And that's when also those negative thoughts started to come up in my head, because they were like, you're not doing anything, you're a failure, you're going to fail. And the beauty of online business in a way is that all of that previous work that you've done will hold and support you for a while. So if you do need to stop and you do need to pause, it won't just immediately drop off a cliff. And that was very much my experience. Like, my business kept ticking along whilst I was trying to deal with all of this sort of thing going on. So I was incredibly lucky in that sense. And this is why I love online business so much. Because it really can support you. But there was no narrative and nobody I could speak to about, well, do you just pause? Do you like do the bare minimum for a little bit? Do you just keep plowing through? Because the narrative is like, you just keep going and you keep going and you block out everything that's going on in your mind and in your body, and you just move forward. And it wasn't until I think I came across somebody who was talking about it, and then they'd lost. Oh no, I'll tell you who it was. There's an incredible lady called Jada Selner. It's her name, Selner, and she had a really successful online business called Simple Green Smoothies, and that had gone to like a multi-million-pound business with her friend. And then she lost her dad, and then she lost her brother in the space of, I think it was something like 12 months. And she talked about it, and she was like, this is what I've done. I just paused the business. I allowed myself to feel all the feels and then be able to move through and start again. And it was the first person that I'd ever seen or heard talk about grief and loss and what happens when you have an online business and things go hard. And that gave me almost the permission to be able to go, actually, it's okay. Just take a breath. We don't have to figure anything else out right now. So I did that. And then I also went to a couple of events, like retreat type events. They were business related, but they were kind of retreat type events overseas. They're in Estonia, actually. Very cool place if you've never been. And I went to them, and they really helped me to get out of the situation and get out of myself. And then I started to bring in the strategy of having some time away just by myself, just to go and relax. So I've hired Airbnbs where I've gone for like 3 nights. Or I would go and stay at like a friend's holiday home, if they would let me go and stay there, every kind of quarter, just to give myself that respite and to be able to go, okay, I need to fill up my own cup right now. So there was very much a focus there was a shift, I guess, of focus from people pleasing, making sure everybody's okay, forgetting about myself, to actually, let's flip the switch. Because if I haven't got my cup filled up, then I can't help anybody else right now. And when I started to do that, that was when the game changed, because I could then have the capacity to be able to go, okay, I can sit with you and I can be here for this, and I can help support you. And I can also help support my clients with whatever they're going through, and still have enough energy at the end of the day for me to be able to carry on the next day, or to go to the gym, or to go and see a friend and be okay. So I think, going back to your question in terms of like the messy middle, that was there for quite a while, and it was hard. There's no doubt about it. But when you can when you can listen to conversations like this, and I'm sure some of your other some of your other podcast interviewees will have talked about their stories as well. When you can start to hear that, or you can start to read about them, then it gives you the chance to go, okay, if I'm in the messy middle right now, can I maybe start to switch some things so I'm giving myself a little bit of time and energy, and give myself a little bit of respite? Is there something that I can do which is minuscule right now, just to help me fill up my cup? Because when we talk about burnout, if you imagine a cup of water, right, I've got my water here. If you imagine your cup of water, when you are a normal person, and normal in quotation marks, you'll start the day down here. And then as the day goes along, the water will start to fill up with different decisions that you've got to make and different situations that happen. By the end of the day, your cup will be pretty full, but then you'll go to bed and it will drain all the way back down again. Now, when you have burnout, your cup starts about 3/4 full. And then you start to add in things and then you overflow because you can't cope. And it's not until we can go, okay, my cup is close to full already at the beginning of the day. That's that's an indication I really need to just kind of start to prioritize myself a little bit more. So I can bring that back down. And then you can coach yourself to go, okay, well, what does that look like? And how does that look? That's when we can start to stop ourselves from burning out and really start to rebuild ourselves again from a place of love and from a place of kindness and empathy.
I love this. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's like it really powerful. And I think when you said about keep going, I think it's knowing the difference and being kind to yourself and aware that burnout is different from doubting yourself. It's
Massively.
It's not a so when we say, oh, you know, you've got to keep going, that's when your saboteurs are going, you know, and trying to disrupt what's going on, your doubts getting in the way, your imposter syndrome, etc. But doubt is another level. And I know I faced burnout just before COVID, and I'm quite grateful that I had that opportunity to slow down, because I don't know what would have happened. It was not good at all. It was really not good. But from that, I left education I was assistant head teacher teaching maths, and I left that for my side hustle and, you know, doing it full time. And here we are 4 years later. But it wasn't like I doubted what I could achieve. I just couldn't even, it didn't feel like I wanted to even put the kettle on. Like I couldn't, everything felt, there was just there was no energy or motivation to do anything, even though I knew that getting out of the door, going for a walk, writing my thoughts down, you know, all of those initiatives that start that process, trying to just ground yourself and ask you, like, I didn't even have the motivation to ask myself, what do I want? Or what do I need? What do I need right now? What does my body even need? Because I was just like, I literally just want to eat and sit in a huddle. I don't want to put any makeup on. I'm tired. I'm just always tired, but I wasn't sleeping. It was just this vicious, horrible crying circle, because I was just crying all the time and just asking too much of myself, and completely asking too much of myself. It was before I came up with warrior energy, which stemmed from my master's degree. And that's where now I focus. And again, I love that. And the cup analogy. And I always say that warrior energy is like my 2 liter bottle. It stretches that cup. So you have more capacity to deal with the challenges, but you've got to stretch that cup first. You've got to create that space. And I think it's from people, you know, like us, if you've gone through that and you've really properly burnt out, you can get to the other side, you learn a lesson, you learn how to get through it, and then you share that story. And so somebody might be listening to this thinking, I need to know how to get out of burnout. Where do you even begin? Because it's not even that sometimes you can't even talk to anybody about it that you might know, because you haven't even got the motivation to form the words in your mouth. You haven't got the motivation to and the emotional vocabulary to explain how you're feeling. Because when I was in that situation, I had a business, a great career, a wonderful, loving husband. It wasn't even based on any sort of emotional stuff. It was just pure exhausting. My son was 15 months, I think. Beautiful house. You know, I was done. That's why I think that was the easiest way that I could have explained it at the time. I was done. I didn't know what to do apart from cry. And then my husband's like, how can I help you? And I was like, get me a McDonald's. I'll probably eat a bit more. Let's drink some more alcohol. You know, that's what I was doing. I was just drinking, probably just to try and numb it. And then that sort of terminology of, what if I don't drink? Let's just feel the feelings a little bit. Like you say, you know, allowing yourself to just process. I think that's a good situation. But again, that feels so uncomfortable, doesn't it? When you start to like process. I was just distracting myself with work. There was all these other things that I've now dealt with and moved through, but I was just a workaholic, and that's how I distracted myself from all the pain I was feeling. But then I burnt myself out anyway. It's just,
yeah, because it's easier to do that. It's easier to
yeah,
numb, and it's easier to distract yourself rather than face what's actually going on. And just to go back to what you were saying before, why I think that it's so important to find a coach that can help you move through that is because when you try and talk to friends or when you talk to family members or your partner, like, don't get me wrong, you can still obviously do
Of
that,
course.
but they come with preconceived notions of what they think you should do and their experiences. And what tends to happen quite a lot is people listen to respond rather than listen to understand.
Yeah.
And this is where you might find yourself in a situation where you're explaining how you're feeling, and they're like, yeah, I know, because I feel like this as well, or I'm just as tired as you, and you're like, oh, that's not quite what I'm here for. Whereas when you're a coach, or when you speak to somebody, even if it's like a therapist that you want to speak to, or somebody who's trained, then they can then ask you questions that can help you go deeper, which then ultimately help you stop numbing and stop distracting yourself. So you can sit with that pain, but with somebody there to witness that and be present with you. So you can then move through it quicker and you can move forward with life. Because I always say, like, you have to, you grow through what you go through first and foremost, but also you need to go through it. You can't go over it, you can't go under it, you can't go around it. Like, if you've got those feelings there that just are niggling and they won't go away time and time again, then you really do have to address what's happening. But it is so hard to do sometimes because it's the last thing that you want to do.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, but it's like, it is worth it. And it doesn't, and I know that a lot of people say like the work is ongoing forever. And I'm kind of like, yes and no, in the sense of you were never broken to begin with. And that part of the work is always there and always needs to be done almost implies that there was something wrong with you in the first place. And there's nothing wrong with you, regardless of what you're going through. You're not broken. There are just some little projects that need to happen and that need your attention so that you can move through them and then feel the way you really want to feel.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's also at that time when I was burnt out, I was running the business and doing the full-time job, and I've ventured into feeling a little bit. This was a couple of years ago, though. It's not been recently, where I thought, oh my goodness, I might get burnt out again. And then I've sort of been able to claw myself back. But I don't want anyone to turn around and say, oh, it's probably best you get a job then, because you shouldn't be running a business. And then there's that, like, that voice in your head saying, well, you have created this because it's your business. You've chosen to do it. So you better make it look like it's really fun and fantastic. When actually, with any job, it isn't always the best. You can create and design your life as much as you want, but there's still going to be elements of just life that are challenges that are there to serve you lessons. Sometimes they feel really uncomfortable and horrible, but that's the way it is. And then again, it goes back to that sort of, what you were saying about saboteurs, that fear of failing, of looking inadequate, when actually it's just life, just that life. And I think moving through that, I didn't, again, the example of me 4 years ago, I wouldn't even be able to recognize her if I passed her in the street now. She's just not me at all, because I didn't talk to anybody. I just cried a lot on the way home from work. When I got home, I didn't voice how I was feeling. And I remember having a really tough conversation with my husband and my sister really close together, probably about 4 or 5 months, once I was feeling okay, of how serious it was. And they were like, oh my God, you've had this in your brain for that long. And I could see the pain it caused them, because I hadn't trusted them with it. But I just thought, what if you say the wrong thing? And I don't know how to come back from, I haven't got any reserves. So I was like, I can't even talk. But you're right. Like, they were going to come with a preconceived, and too close, far too close for me to, at that time, to really be honest. Because I talk about having a pity party. Now, there's, again, a definite difference between having a pity party and feeling your feelings. If you're keeping yourself stuck because of, and again, I was the queen of pity parties. If you're keeping yourself stuck about something that's repeating, and you're repeating that behavior and you're not applying the solution, and it's because it's easier to stay in that negative mindset, it's more comfortable. That's one thing. But trying to talk about your feelings with somebody is not having a pity party. It's just so different, because it's the solution is talking about it, but also finding somebody that isn't going to be hurt that you're hurting. Is that emotional distance that if my clients are going through that kind of thing, I can support them in such a fresh-faced way. I can translate what they're saying, how they're feeling. I can interpret their body language, even though it's over Zoom. You know, if lucky enough, I've got some clients in person, I can do that. But my husband and my sister are just thinking, oh my God, she's in pain. I just want to rescue her. I just want her to feel better. I wish I could take that pain away. When you're a coach, you do want to do that, but you're not as attached to it, are you? As those other people.
Yeah, and also you have the capacity to be able to show up for them in that
Yeah.
way. Now, it's not to say that you can't can't talk with your partner or
No.
your siblings about this sort of thing. But if you're ever looking for a little bit of guidance on this, what I do with my partner when I'm struggling with something, because he instantly jumps into, let me fix it. It's quite a
Yes.
masculine thing to
Mine
do, isn't
too.
it?
Yeah.
I'll fix it for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have to say to him, I don't want you to fix anything. I just want you to listen. And when he comes to me with something that's hard, I say, do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to help find you a solution?
Yeah.
And then it sets the tone for that conversation. Because if somebody just wants you to listen, which most of the time they do, and it's the same with friends, I say that to them as well. Do you just want to rant, or are you looking for a
Yeah.
solution as well? And they're like, I just want to rant. And I'm like, sweet, go ahead.
Yeah.
And that way the pressure is off you, where you're like, if say, for example, if you're a people pleasing, you're like, what's the answer here for that person?
Yeah.
Like, how can I help them? And jumping into all of this unsolicited advice for them, where they're like, I never wanted any of that, I just wanted a rant.
Yeah.
Then it helps you, it helps them, and it really helps the whole situation. So that then if you do need a difficult conversation with your partner or like a loved one, you can say, look, I'm just here to rant, and like just let me say what I need to say, and then give me a hug at the end. And again, we've just not been taught this, particularly as women. We get taught to make sure that everybody else is okay. And when it comes to us, we just kind of push it under the rug, or we
Yeah.
avoid talking about it. And it does take a certain type of person, or if you've got a really great partner, to go, or also to call you out on what you're doing, because I find myself doing it occasionally, where I'm like, no, everything's fine, and then I'll explode and I'll burst
Yeah.
into tears, and he's like,
Yeah.
oh, here we are again, Ailish. And I'm like, oh yeah, this
Yeah.
is how I feel. So like, I'm not saying I'm perfect with this, but it like the having a loving partner is really, really handy,
Yeah.
and it's great. I wish it for everybody.
Mm.
And also just having that sentence of like, do you just want to rant, or do you want to come up with a solution? It just helps to set the tone for those conversations too.
Yeah, that is great. Even me and my husband do it as well. And he's well, I just want to fix everything. He just wants to fix everything. But sometimes we just need to just chat and talk, and that's okay. And it's having those uncomfortable conversations as well. They're painful in those moments, but you become so much closer because of those uncomfortable conversations. And that's where you grow as a couple anyway. So that's definitely me and my husband. He's like, I don't want to talk about this. And I'm like, well, this is the deal. We have to talk about this, because otherwise we might, get resentful and da 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 da. And I think it's working at it, isn't it? And working, and again, going back to all of this, it's working not only in the relationship with the people around you, but the relationship with yourself, and
Mhm.
giving yourself permission to say, I deserve this space for myself. I deserve this joy. I deserve to create that space for me so that I can give more. And how much of a happier version, and I'm sure you're the same, I'm such a happier version of myself, but I'm so much more capable. And
Mm.
I've achieved so much more by recognizing my energy levels and giving myself something back every day without fail. I'm either writing, reading, listening to music, exercising every day. The biggest thing, I don't know about you, but it's like drinking water. The amount of clients I have in my membership as well, they're like, oh, I don't drink enough water. I think, how can you expect your body and brain to function? Drink your water.
Massively.
It starts there. Oh, thank you. So honestly, Ailish, this has been amazing. Before I ask you the last question, where can people find you?
Yeah, of course. So you can find me over on Instagram at ailish.lucas. So that's AILISH.LUCAS, because I know I have a strange name. And it's my URL is ailishlucas.com.
Amazing. Thank you. So I ask everyone on here, what would you tell yourself 10 years ago? Oh, sorry. What would you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Oh, listen to yourself and trust those feelings. Like, stop looking at what everybody else's version of success is and look at what yours is, and just go for it. Because when you do, things happen really quickly and it becomes way more fun and way more magical.
Love it. Magic. I love it. Thank you so much, Ailish. This has been amazing.
Oh, thank
Absolutely
you for
amazing.
having me.
So yeah, go and find it. I honestly think this is one of those episodes where it's a standout. Like this is gonna change lives, this episode. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've loved it.
You're very welcome. See you later. Right, fake goodbye.